slides here, Ed, and get us kicked off. But hi, welcome everyone. Um, uh, we had the great fortune of actually being asked to see if we could share with you some of the what we think are the bare minimum basic pieces that you would need to have in place if you were working on a shoestring budget for trying to tackle big projects, right? So based on our, many years of history here, Ed and I are like, let's see if we can simplify this. So Ed Puckett and I are both co-chairs for the Educause PMC G. So we do all of the project and portfolio management group work and try to work with mostly larger scale groups. So I will tell you that we'll share some resources later on, but know that what we did is kind of tried to filter those things down to the things that we think would be the most beneficial and useful for everyone here. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this next piece here and explain. We all know that project management is important, right? Um, there are some common pitfalls for why projects fail. So again, keeping in mind what those core principles or things would be that you'd need to focus on. The reason that most projects fail is because there's a lack of clarity in the goal or the value or the things that you're trying to accomplish, and little alignment to existing strategic plans and goals and business objectives, and a failure in communicating all of that information from different teams throughout the teams, not just the team that's managing the project, but also those stakeholders and folks who are involved and invested in the outcome of the project. And of course, the inadequate executive support. Now, I'm going to talk about this one in a little bit here in a couple slides, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the executive has to be involved lockstep the entire way. But sometimes when you're dealing with these smaller organizations, a lot of times what you're going to find is that the executive is tasking the project manager to act on their behalf. And there are formal ways to do so that will help in supporting and empowering that project manager, whether it's by name, title, or an accidental project role. That person has been basically asked to act on that executive's behalf, right? That is very common in very quick, nimble organizations where you can't be there all the time. You find your trusted staff member who's going to be that lead for you. Okay? So, why bare bones project management? The obvious. You're dealing with reducing budgets in certain areas, and in most cases, when we're in higher ed, that budget that's getting cut is going to be all around the administrative fund, right? We've got to shift that money to the academic side, the research side, and all the other pieces that are not the administration of the universities. So you got to find ways to do things on the lean and be able to still manage your operations while you're doing the projects. And I think I heard a couple folks, maybe it was Jeff even mentioning that we're looking to be agile. I'm going to mention here that one of the things that people get wrong about agile is that they focus on it meaning that we need to go fast. Yes, it does go fast, but it can also go really badly if you go fast without focusing on, again, the value and the business reasons why you're doing these things, right? So agile is really intended to deliver value quickly. This is one of the things that you will not get a lot of detail from me on today, but I think this is actually a series that the PMCG might have to spin up as well, because I think there have been quite a few misunderstandings about what the real purpose is behind Agile. And it can be a very powerful way of managing projects, but you have to keep your eye on the important pieces of it. So why bare bones? Even why can't we just not do project management? Why can't we just skip all that rigor and just jump right into doing things? Well, because the one thing that you need the most out of project management is really going to be the clarity and the connection. By connection, we're talking communication and information sharing and just ensuring that the people who are working on that project are connected and working on the same things. Project management acts as that sort of, I don't know, what do we call it? The tape, the glue, the sticking things together, Ed? Like we tend to be the people who create the the grouping of everybody and keep us focused on the right things, right? And that's the same case for the accidental project manager too, and they can do that as well, even on the bare bones, right? So project management is ensuring that clarity and connection and enabling success. And even with the bare bones, you can do this with the minimum resources and still be effective as long as you're keeping an eye on these pieces. You want to be clear and you want to make sure everybody's connected and working together. So the benefits, obviously, of working with that simplified approach is you're going to find that it's reducing the complexity. It's focusing on the impact, the goal, the objective, the values. And if you can get that right, I think you're going to find that you're empowering even your accidental project managers. It's really hard for them to be successful if they're not clear on what the real value or business objective is. And if you can get that, then even your accidental project manager is going to be able to make magic happen with minimal resources, documentation, and support tools, right? So simplifying doesn't have to mean that you're not doing things effectively. It's just kind of getting rid of some of the other stuff that maybe is more for documentation and covering your butts more than it is really trying to help out with managing the teamwork. So the things that we identified, Ed and I talked about as sort of that bare bones tools to manage is going to be your project charge. And I'm going to give a caveat here because you can very well get a project charge that is already part of the existing project charter. I'll talk about both of these in a little bit more detail. Sometimes people just combine them, but I found that in higher ed, for whatever reasons, we like to do both separately. It's a unique way of doing things, but you can find that there is a difference in those takes. There's also your communication plan. You don't have to think big on this. This is typically a pretty simplistic, straightforward document, but it will go a long way if you spend some time on it. Your notes and your day-to-day management, of course, and then closure and lessons learned. So Ed and I will spend some time talking about these in a little bit more detail. So the first thing I want to talk about here is the project charge. This is going to answer the why you're doing it in the first place. Why are we doing this project? And the real purpose of this one is so that you can clearly articulate, what's the purpose of this project? What are our goals? What are the things that we really need to make happen with the project? What are the outcomes? What are your expectations for at the end of this project? We can say these things were accomplished and it was successful and we can move on to other things. It's the simple version, though, of what goes into what more people refer to as the project charter. So this is really tasking the team with making the project happen, right? In the University of Michigan, we have an interesting case where we've taken this to a slightly different level, where we have what we call an executive charge. And the executive charge is a little bit more of the business side of things, where the executive directors, the managers, the directors, they've all done sort of a precursory evaluation of the business needs for that project. And they've done some financial assessment and done a little bit of basic, like pulling some things together to say, we need to make this happen. Here's my recommendation for moving forward with it. And because we have such a large institution, we have a lot more service governance layers, right? So that executive charge is typically something that they'll review with a larger group of leadership to make sure that we're actually doing the right work, right? Once that gets approved, it goes through the PMO, it gets put through the whole governance and prioritization, and then it gets assigned to a project manager who will take things further and start really developing more content around the project, right? But this is kind of a unique thing from what I've seen, both the project charge, executive summary charge, like to higher ed, because in private sector, a lot of times you see that this is actually just part of the existing charter. Like it's the first step in developing a project charter, which is the formal document that the PMI recognizes. So folks who are in PMP certified or have been through the whole PMBOK review and understand these things, the official term is a project charter. That's the who, the what, the how. This gets into the more detailed information about how the project's going to be working on things, right? It's not a very detailed plan that gives specific prescriptive activities, but it does line up some of the very important pieces like what's in scope and what's out of scope. And that's a really important one to look at too. Don't skip that one because a lot of times you want to know very clearly what are we not doing. If you have some very obvious parameters or guardrails you want to put on that project so that the team doesn't start going off and looking at things that aren't going to give you that value, then put that front and center. All right. It's going to give them the problem statement, the purpose for the project, the objectives of trying to solve that. It's going to formally name the project. It's going to authorize the project manager and team to do the work. I will say that, again, if you skip a project charge as a separate document and just put that into the beginning of a charter, it still is authorizing that project manager to act on your behalf, but maybe with a little bit different take on it. So a charge may be explicitly saying, I'm giving you full control and full reign to do this thing. I've already done the budget assessment and all that piece. Go run with it. A charter, on the other hand, tends to be formally signed off by a team. And so the executive director or sponsor might actually be involved in developing all the content of the charter along with the project manager and really trying to make sure that they're comfortable with everything that's being developed in there, right? So there's a little bit more oversight into it. But you can also choose not to do that. That's some organizations do, but it tends to be a little bit more of a collaborative effort with whoever the person is at the end of the day that says, I'm responsible for this thing being done, right? Yeah. Is everybody still with me so far? Yeah. Do we have any questions yet? No? All right. So the communication
Jennifer,
plan. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was debating asking. That's why it took me so long. I'm Alan Chen. I'm at the California Institute of the Arts. Um, project charters, we've gone back and forth on doing them, and this is a small college question, so I appreciate you're not at one. So I'm partially asking this for everybody else too, towards everybody else. We've gone back and forth on doing them because the time to do it, even though it's not a lot of time to sit down and hash it all out, sometimes we find it can slow us down, and it also takes away from people who are wearing 9 different hats as it is. I don't know if you have any response to that comment. Do you find, yeah,
I
I
will
don't know.
tell you that I've worked at startup companies before and I've managed consulting teams before, and we've been able to knock these out in 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay.
So my experience has been that more often than not, people overthink the charter content. And you get stuck in what the project management world calls analysis paralysis, where you're questioning your own stuff. You're going, oh, but oh, maybe we need to put more detail. Maybe that's not clear enough.
Disagree with me.
It's really not meant to be, like I said, it's not a prescriptive document. And the more prescriptive you are, the less likely you are to give the team some flexibility to deal with things when issues come up, right? So it's really most important to just say, this is the problem. This is what strategy we're taking to solve it. Here's some guardrails if we think there's some things that might come up that we know absolutely needs to be considered out of scope, so don't go there. So that the team can make quick judgment calls and decisions to say, oh, nope, not what we're looking at here. Put that one on the back burner and we can deal with that at another time, right? And then really trying to think through some of like those key dates that you might have to work around and milestones. That's like the real crux of a good charter. You don't have to have, like, I've seen some of my teams even here at the University of Michigan, it's like a 3-page document. If that's what they like to be able to sleep at night and feel better about it, that's fine. But at the end of the day, that's not what it's really good for. It's not really in your best interest to be so verbose in these documents that you find that people are like, well, that's not what we agreed to up front. We had all of these details up front. Now you can't, now you have to spend time discussing why things are different. If you get practiced in it, I think you'll find that your teams can really get a decent charter well under an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jen, I wanted to step in and say, both, if you were to look at the charters I write, most of them are, I've got a template that I'm working for because our university has templates that we like to use, and most of my charters are in those different sections or just bulleted lists. I'm just outlining what is expected to be accomplished, how the project's going to be run, what the timeline is. And I can say every time, and it's happened to me a couple of times, every time I am told to skip a charter, or the project's moving along really fast and they say, oh, we just don't have time. We're just gonna cut and run and get this thing done. Every time that happens, I don't have a charter. I actually can tell you the time we thought we saved by not doing the charter, we ended up burning that time messing around with the ambiguity that was created because there was no charter.
It is a bit of a fine art to get into because you want to have enough information to be helpful to guide and direct, but not so over the top that it limits the team, right?
Yeah.
But like I created one so I'm managing the digital accessibility program for the University of Michigan right now, right? I have like 6 simultaneous work streams going on right now as part of that. One of which is implementing a new tool for course content accessibility reviews within Canvas. My teams really didn't have the bandwidth. I've got a very small subject matter expertise team for digital accessibility, and then a lot of other folks across campus who are just really well-intentioned, good-hearted people who are like, I love this, let me help. All right. Even though we were buying tools and getting things moving along and the team didn't have much time, I still threw together a chart. I was the one person, the one project manager across all those work streams, which is crazy. Don't ever do that to somebody. But I still put the charter together. Lo and behold, I finally got another project manager. After a little bit of begging and pleading, I got another person to help me out. That charter actually got him up and running and starting to manage that entire work stream within like 3 days. He's like, sweet, I know what's going on. I can do this. And like, it took less than a week for me to onboard him and get him off and running. And I think there's value in just having something there that people can look at and understand. Yep, I understand what we're trying to do here. Let's make magic happen now. So it is a little bit of time, but I think it's got so much value in doing that little bit of time that sometimes people even throw a project at you that's failing. I'll give that consulting team I managed once before. They would throw projects at our team because we were so good at working with customers that were failing. And some of the times we found out that it was because they didn't actually have any sort of detailed charter or implementation plan with the customer. So we'd spend the time to develop one. And then we were able to quickly course correct and fix those failing projects with the customers, right? It's just a strange little thing that clarity in that document goes a long way. So yeah, it does take time, but if you get good, you can get it done in under an hour. If you spend more than a couple hours on something, then you just need to tell folks like, that's enough. I think this has got to be good enough. Right?
Thank you.
You betcha.
And I would add also, Jen, that if it's taking that long to create the charter, it is possible, not always, it's possible that maybe there's a reason it's taking that long. There's some things aren't where they need to be for that project to be ready to go.
That's it. That's a really great point. And I have actually had I'd say one, maybe two experiences where it was partially because the project itself was just too big to do all at one time. And we had to break it apart. Let's focus on the immediate thing, and then we can have something to come back to later on to do the next step, right? So it helps to break things apart into things that the teams can wrap their brains around at that moment. All right. Communication plans, I think the one challenge we get into is that sometimes we tend to overthink them. And we'll put in like these big strategy statements, and then, oh, here's like the tactics we're going to take to do the communication. And like you have like these multiple page workbooks in Excel or Google Sheets and whatnot. It's like, don't overthink it. Think about the people that are involved, what they need, like what information are they going to need, and then what's the best mechanism for communicating with them. The value of a communication plan is just making it very clear that you're committing to communicating information that is going to be useful and important to the people who need to know or will want to know, or could throw your project under the tracks if they wanted to, or like the people who have some sort of invested interest in that particular project, right? It can be as simple as if you're doing an operational project, it's a small scale thing. It could just be a very simple sheet that shows the team's going to have daily stand-ups for 15 minutes every day over Zoom. There will be a weekly status report delivered via email, and we will have a monthly summary or something for executive officers on the status of the project that will be delivered via email. Like, it could be that simple, but the real piece there is just know who the people are that you need to be communicating with, how to best reach them, how often they want to be reached, and through what sort of formatting, and then pick your key messages. Because more often than not, you want to have like very clear, succinct messaging on what it is that you're trying to do with that project, and just keep selling that and reiterating it. That's it. It's a pretty simple thing, and I've done it with small worksheets before with teams, and we find that actually the simpler it is, the easier it is to manage. If you get into a large project, you may find that you're better having somebody who is dedicated to that role, because a lot of times when you're in the day-to-day and doing a lot of work, you're going to find that the communication tends to be the last thing that you're really thinking of. And so somebody else to kind of be that sort of checks and balances to say, nope, we need to make sure that we're doing this so it doesn't get dropped, right? But hopefully most of them are pretty small. I've done a lot of communication on even some decent sized projects before. We can, even as big as the University of Michigan is, we don't always have dedicated communication staff. And so it's just a matter of us knowing and agreeing together, here's who and what and how, and I can craft out something really quickly and make sure it gets out there. But you have to commit to the communication piece. And it's another one of those core pieces that goes a long way. Any questions? If not, I can turn this back to Ed, and Ed can share with us.
Well, I do have one quick question. Just taking that terminology of the accidental project manager. I think 3 areas that I think might be interesting to navigate is scope creep, prickly personalities, and loss of an executive sponsor. So can you speak to those things in terms of, I'm a new project manager, someone's threw the project charter on my desk, and now I have to navigate this new world. How would I deal with those three potential issues?
I would actually say, this is just my thoughts here. The first one to tackle is going to be, who's the new executive sponsor?
Okay.
Just because push comes to shove, you need to know who that person is that's going to be able to move mountains if something really crazy comes up. After that, then it's going to be, you mentioned scope creep. It's going back to that charter to make sure that there were some clear out of scope areas that you can run that past. If it's not there, you go to your executive sponsor or that sponsor to say, okay, you need to help me make that decision. Is this something that we want to include in this effort? Or is it something that we're going to say, not now? And if they're not comfortable making like a firm decision, then sometimes what I might advocate or recommend is, okay, if you're not comfortable with a yes or no right now, can we at least agree to putting this sort of on a backlog and we can deal with it at a later time? Now, backlog terminology is not a project management PMP kind of concept, but it is very much used in the agile world where you have to make trade-offs. So you only have so much time, so much money, so many resources. And at the end of the day, a lot of times you have a very fixed timeline that you need to work on. You're going to try and find those things that are lower value, and you're going to put that on the backlog. Like prioritize all the stuff, and then things that can't, just move it over there.
Sure.
Ed, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on like what's the accidental project managers coming in and
That
moving, chasing things.
as soon as he said one and then number two, executive
Oh,
sponsor, I
and
stopped.
then, yeah, and personalities. So ultimately,
Yeah.
different personalities that you're gonna run into on your road to try to get the project completed. How do you how would you say that an accidental project manager should sort of navigate that arena or that scene?
So I'll jump in there. What I was going to say was as soon as you said loss of executive sponsor, I ignored the other two because that was the most important thing. 'Cause
Absolutely.
personalities, that is always a doozy, right? And I would say this, you spend your career learning how to deal with strong different personality types, strong personalities, shy personalities, passive aggressive personalities, and you continue to refine those skills. Take the courses that hopefully your university is offering. If they don't, then find some, and just so it'll come with obviously knowledge, and the rest of it will come with experience. Just dealing with those personalities. You're an accidental project manager, so also give yourself space to make those mistakes, and that's probably where you're going to be making some of those is as you're interacting with people. It just happens. People, we're all funny, right? We all have our baggage that we bring to the table, and that's what makes projects so hard. And that's why Jen just said communication is one of the most important things, because the projects impact people. It's all about the people. So.
I think one of the hardest things for a accidental project manager to come to grips with is that you're going to find that more often than not, that team is going to make or break the success, and your relationship and communication with that team is going to make or break the success of the project. A lot of times in projects where there's a formal project manager, we've got a whole bunch of toolkit things that we can pull out that can help us along the way. But at the end of the day, it's still people. And that project manager, that accidental project manager has to figure out who their team members are going to be that can really help like champion the work. Who's your person who's like, yeah, I'm bought into this. This is a great idea. We need to make it happen. And then keep an eye on the ones that maybe are kind of grumbling or making funny faces in the meetings or maybe have some thoughts and opinions and maybe sharing them, maybe not. I don't know. I've been on some where we have some very vocal people, and I've also been on some where they're just sitting there chit-chatting and poo-pooing things behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
It's just being aware of the people and the personalities and what their personal interests are in the project.
I'm an introverted feeler, and so at a previous job, I'd been at this university for, I don't know, almost 20 years. And so boss came to me and said, man, Ed, you do a really good job. There's a point to this story. You do really good. Like you read the room. It's like natural. You just work with the people. And it's just awesome. You need to be able to teach that. I had it ingrained in me. I don't know that I could have taught it. So I changed jobs, moved to K-State. And I learned real quick that the fabric that I relied on at the previous institution, this natural ability, because I understood the players, knew what was going on. And even if new people came in, it wasn't that hard for me to adjust. All that was ripped out from me. And it took me a while. And I struggled on a couple of projects in the new role just because I didn't know the people, didn't know the players, and I'm still learning it. And so I had to, for a while, I suffered imposter's disease, but then I had to give myself a break and say, you've switched the role, cut yourself some slack. You're going to now have to learn the people stuff again. So work the job, go through the journey. So my
And
point in all that is it's a constant, especially with personalities and people stuff, the communication, the soft skills, which I don't like that phrase, soft skills. I'm searching for a
what do
better
they
phrase.
call them now? Power skills? I think that's what
Yeah,
the
I think they call them
PMI is
power
calling it
skills.
now.
That's just an ongoing, I mean, you never close the book on that lesson, right?
I will say that if you are truly on a bare bones organization, you're going to find that you have less people to navigate, and that actually can be a good thing.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So we'll move over to notes and day-to-day management. And this is kind of Jen and I keep talking about what's in the PMI body of knowledge. And so this is another one of those. It's not necessarily in there, but doesn't mean it's less important. This actually, if you don't master this can eat your lunch is the phrase I like to use. Former K-12 teacher here. So if you didn't address anything in your classrooms, that's what you were going to spend your lunchtime hour on, was fixing those issues, right? So the same thing with projects. So notes, meeting notes are so critical. Get in the habit of taking notes in your project meetings. It's your tool for capturing that progress. I look at it as a working journal, a log, maybe my own private blog. I don't want to use the word private because I do share my notes, but it's like a micro blog of that project. And you're really looking to track some basic elements for each meeting. You're looking for the date, the attendees. I like to list all the people that are invited, and then using Microsoft Word, I'll strike through the ones that didn't attend. I'm not taking attendance for the sake of attendance, but I'm trying to map the meeting notes to who was there. So if a decision was made and I noticed that someone's name had to strike through, ooh, they weren't there for that decision. Is that a call to action to me to get them back in sync, And then I'll have a section for topics or new business. I've now evolved to say it's like my during the meeting topics that they need to come up. And then I track decisions and risks. And then I also have an action items section, which I didn't list here. Shame on me, but I do have a section for each note for action items. And then because we use a project management system, I set aside time after the meeting to make sure that the relevant action items are put into our project management system. So I'm not tracking a task list in Microsoft Word and some to-do items in our project system. You're not a stenographer, which is the point of my third bullet there. You're not there to take down every word that's said. You definitely want to keep your head on a pivot and focus on things that have an impact to scope, time, and cost. And of course, any risks and any decisions, as we just talked about, that come up. So just keep that in mind. I'm a firm believer in consistent organization. As you get more and more experience as a project manager, you'll find that your project managers will manage multiple projects. And so they'll be working with different sets of people, or in smaller colleges, you may find you're working with the same set of people, or there's at least an intersection. There's always a few people that are in your project that follow you along. And so I try to keep my notes consistent project to project. And I'll share a template to show you where my consistency, how I use consistency to keep things organized, so that I'm not asking my project team to say, oh, on project A, Ed took his notes this way. Now on project B, he's over here in left field taking his notes a different way. So now I have to figure out where he put the decisions. I don't want anyone to have to figure that out. And then I always send a copy of my notes to participants after the meeting, even if we're using Teams and I know it's digitally there and they can always access it. I'm always taking those days' notes and either sending it out to them in a Teams channel or sending it out to them in an email. The way I organize myself in my day, I have like a 5.5 by 8 inch journal that I use, and I write down all the meetings I have for that day. And then I have a focus hour for myself. And so I have a section where I write down the things I'd like to accomplish in that focus hour. The reason I do that is it also cues me that I never let myself cross off a meeting is complete until the meeting notes go out. So if you have like a 10 o'clock meeting and it's done, but then you have to zoom over to your 11 o'clock, it's just a reminder for me that before I walk away from my computer, I've sent those notes out, and then I could cross that meeting out, even if that's 3 hours or 4 hours later. I do try to send them out that same day. Not always perfect, but 90% of the time, I want to be the guy that's sending those notes out that same day. Get a lot of comments about AI, and this is actually coming up in my project team. We're just talking about AI and using it because, you know, this Zoom session is being recorded, and I believe there's a transcript that's being prepared for that. And if we wanted to, we could submit this transcript to our favorite AI tool and write a nice, clever prompt that says, hey, can you summarize these notes and create sections to highlight any decisions that were made and action items. And that's all cool stuff. And I believe AI does a great job with that. So I'm not a technology Luddite. My only caveat with AI is it's been proven, because we all have been college students before, or at least in academics in some way. We know that if we write things down, we are improving our retention, and we're also increasing the likelihood that we are engaged in active listening, because in order to figure out what are the impacts to scope, time, and cost, we're having to engage to figure out what am I going to write over here in my notes so that my notes are coherent, right? And so I tend to shy away from AI because I know that if I used to say, oh, I got AI, watching my back, that in my ADHD self, and thanks to being a project manager, it even reinforces that. So in my ADHD self, I know in about 5 to 10 minutes, if I just rely on AI, I'll start to fade away. My attention will start to wane. So I'm a firm believer in taking my own notes. I'm starting to consider if I'm going to use AI as a backup, but still thinking that through in my head. So those are my comments on just notes and day-to-day management there. I think I can take over this screen, Jen, real quick, just temporarily. Or maybe I have the next slide too. So let me pull up. Okay, yes. So let me pull up a set of notes just so that I can be a little bit more pragmatic about what I do. I'm sending a request to share. I don't know who's getting that request.
I am not seeing anything, but I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Oh, that helped. Thank you. All right. So these are notes for a particular project that I am currently in the process of managing. And so you'll see a couple of things that I do, and I'm using Microsoft Word. I used to use OneNote, but I've even gone simpler to Jen's comment before. Word just makes it simple. And I've had issues with OneNotes because I used to synchronize OneNote across a project team, and I've had issues with OneNote not catching the changes. So Word it is, and I use strict headings, and there's a reason I do. So the top of the page always gets the heading 1, and then my sections get heading 2s, and then each date has a heading 2 as well. So every meeting is recorded, and I use the same document. I don't put meeting notes in separate documents, and that allows me, if I just go to the View tab, to expose the navigation pane, and then I can quickly move up and down these notes as quick as I want. So that allows me to find things based on 2 different ways of queuing them. If I happen to know a decision was made on a certain meeting date, I can go straight to that meeting date and say, yep, here, we made a decision. Am I going to be able to do this on the fly? Yep, here on January 8th, we made a decision about how we're going to handle the testing problem because the platform we're using doesn't have a test environment. But it's a whole nother story. Or I can just use the search bar and type in decisions because every time a decision is made, I type that word in the comment in line and it normally highlights them all and I can jump straight down to that decision. You'd see yellow decisions today. It's not doing it because I either misspelled the word in front of y'all or something else going. But I used to use a decisions table, but I found that I was spending a lot of time moving up and down my document or hopping over to the decisions table to update that table, tracking the decision, who made the decision, what was the impacts of that decision, so that I could type faster. I just said, all right, somebody just made a decision. I'm going to just front that statement with the word decision. That's how I handle that. Would do the same.
Also accessible.
Yes.
When you use it in line like that, that's actually a really good practice.
The only challenge, I'm going to critique my method. The only challenge is in this particular project that we're looking at, I don't know if I'm on that page yet because I'm focused on presenting here, but there's a decision that we made. And even though I had it documented, we went back and modified it. And so in 2 or 3 meetings later or further up the document, I typed decision mod and then had to go back and find where the original decision was made because we were changing data elements. We were going to add a few more, even though we agreed to limit it. That's my thing on notes. Let's see if I can hop back over to the slide deck. I can pause there if I need to, if anyone's got any questions.
I'm going to throw in another tip here, and I don't know if your example there had it or not, but another good way of keeping folks focused on what the objective is for your project is to put something at the very top of the notes that's kind of like your statement, your objectives, or some sort of way of keeping things very clear, that reminder, this is what we're working on. This is what we're working toward. That comes in handy, especially when you are developing something new, like a new tool, a new service, a new product or something, that you've got this sort of vision statement front and center. I can't tell you how helpful that was with some of the teams I've worked on that have never done product development or service development before, to have a very clear, succinct statement of what that tool is intended to do. And we kept that on all of our meeting notes front and center from day one. And it was a good way to remind ourselves when they were thinking about all the other things that they'd like to do. It's like, that sounds great, except this is what we're doing. This is the main objective of this particular initiative, right?
Yeah, and I actually, I've been thinking about doing that as well. It's not something I have done. You would think a project manager would. I do put a resource section at the top and questions. So as questions come up in the meeting, they're documented at the appropriate meeting date down below. Once we get that answer, I move it up to the top. Of course, I have the important dates. That's a dynamic table. I try to keep that updated as we move forward through the project. This particular project, I went ahead and extracted the major high-level milestones from our project system because our business partners or campus partners don't have the same access that I do to our platform, our project platform. And then I've got an issues table. And going forward, my next project, I am definitely going to add another section called summary or project objective. Put that elevator pitch or that summary goal right there so that that's our compass, that's our North Star. So, yeah.
Oh, look at you throwing out all those PMI terminologies.
What, North Star? I don't know if I was ever tempted on the phrase North Star, but in Boy Scouts I was. I know the North Star is north, and South Star doesn't exist. No, so I digress. Little Wednesday fun. Closures and lessons learned. So this is, you've done your charter, you've executed your project, you've done all the things, you've taken notes all along the way, and now it's time to close out the project. And the closure document, again, I'm going to echo everything Jen said about the charter for the closure. It doesn't have to be a manifesto. It can be a very simple document that just says things like, these are who the sponsors are. This is the project team members. This is what we set out to accomplish, and these are the things that we accomplished. And oh, by the way, because of things out of our control, we didn't get this one thing done, if that's the case. And this is how we're going to address it. Maybe it moves over to operations, or maybe another phase has to be created. We're going to spin off another project. You're just trying to capture that you set out to do what you said you were going to do and got it done. And then you also want to capture the lessons learned. And I look at this as, yes, you want to capture what worked, or you want to capture the good things. And you want to also capture the bad things so that you can repeat the good things and turn all those bad mistakes into opportunities to improve, right? So you want to capture that. And I've listed a couple of the typical elements that you can see in a closure document there. And again, it doesn't have to be a 4-page document. It can be a 1-page, 2-page document, just listing all the things I just enumerated. The other thing to do that is more important than all the documentation, and don't tell PMI I said that, but more important than all the documentation is to celebrate the win. Do something to call attention to the fact that the team got together, had a goal put in front of them, they've made that goal, and it can be very simple. It can be acknowledging them in an email. It can be acknowledging them on LinkedIn if you've got all those connections, saying, hey, we just launched this thing and here's all the people, and I'm tagging the people that were involved so that it shows up in their LinkedIn profile. It can be get a pizza and some drinks, and by the way, the alcoholic drinks are on y'all, but we'll provide the soda, that type of thing. So just so that people have time to breathe and say, we did this. This is cool. We worked hard. Too many times we move on to the next project. Hey, good job. All right, here's your next project. I used to have a boss that would say, hey, Ed, good job on that project. You know what you get when you complete a project? I go, no, what? Another project. And take time to celebrate. So I was going to share a template, but I think the way I want to handle the templates for the closures and lessons learned is the PMCG has a template library. And I can walk you through that. When you join the PMCG, we have just go to Educause, get into for the project management community group, and in our library we share templates. We have even a process for other project managers to submit their favorite templates, and I believe we've got a few closure documents in there. But I'm going to say you hardly really need a template for a closure as long as you just got a Word document that's got these headings and items that to support that, right? So moving on to the next slide. Project managers always create tables. So Jen came through. I was worried that our slide deck had no tables.
Didn't have enough tables in it, right?
I know, right? So this is Jen, you're just trying to summarize the documents and the items that
When
they
we
address.
first started off, we said there are certain things that do lead to project failure. Like it's a known thing, right? And thought I'd summarize the documents that we've shared as being those bare bones items, what role they really play in trying to avoid those failures.
So those are I'll zoom in on that table. So that's just giving you a high level overview of what, how these documents will address those, prevent or avoid or help reduce those failures. Some resources, and I'm going to attempt to, because I know you can't click on these links themselves. So I'm going to expose the chat, put it over here on my other monitor, and I'm going to quickly try to, whoops, now you can see our YouTube channel. I did not mean to do that, but this is great timing. So this is our YouTube channel.
Great promotion.
I accidentally fat fingered my mouse, but it's okay because now you get to see what the YouTube channel looks like. So I posted that link there. You do not have to be a member of the PMCG to browse our YouTube channel. It's out there. It's just where we put our recordings. There are some good ones, and not what I was attempting to do before I fumbled my mouse was share some of these resources. So I can take the links here if it'll let me. There you go. So we talked about accidental project manager, and for a while, this second link that I put into the chat was one of our most viewed presentations, given back toward the beginning of the pandemic, if I can use that word pandemic. Just talks about, so you've been given a project, and so what are some things you need to do? So you can watch this recording that Jen and I just gave, but you can also go watch this presentation given by one of our steering committee members. It is an awesome, well-received presentation. I talked a little bit about note-taking. Oh, just getting me every time. I know what I'm doing now. We'll just stay in edit mode.
You
This
could also
one,
delegate it to me and I could do it while you talk
that
about
would
it.
be, if you could, I'll take adventures in note-taking. So this is adventures in note-taking. This goes into more detail about note-taking. What I love about this presentation is that we gave it to the community group, and in the process of giving this presentation, I had little spots for people to interact and share. And so we got all sorts of tips and tricks from other people in the community group. And I learned just as much as anyone else did. I'm so glad I got to present and receive that. Really good presentation. The other one in there is the Waterfall Agile and Lean. You heard, oh my, is what it is, given by a couple people at Notre Dame. They talk about different kind of ways to run projects. So Jen talked a little bit about Agile, and Notre Dame's got the creative way. They've got like Watergile, I think is the phrase. Don't quote me on that, but they've even gone so far as to define hybrids between the different methodologies because they've run into situations where they needed to get a little creative at how they manage their projects. We also talked about communications, and I still maintain communications will eat your lunch if you don't get that right. But again, from Notre Dame, the gentleman in this presentation, ComHacker, presented at the Digital Educause conference a year ago, and we asked him to come give the same presentation at our PMCG group. Very creative way of thinking about communications, and he actually dispelled some myths that I had about how communication works and what our students read and what they don't read. So those are some good resources. So now that I've flooded you with resources, you can also just browse our YouTube channel. That's a great place to start and just pick up some things that sound interesting to you. But I think I'm going to stop there, Jen, and I'll turn it over to the group if there's any questions, comments. I'll stop the share.
I'll make a comment. We really struggle here with the decision. You know, we make a decision and it's in our notes, but we haven't done the notes like you did. I love that. It's just the one document. And so a month or 2 months later, we're like, oh my gosh, what did we decide? And then someone's scrambling to look to see what was that decision we made. And anyway, it just causes a lot of confusion and slows us down. And I think that's a really great way of being able to easily keep track of that and refer to decisions.
Oh.
So thank you.
Another good practice you're going to find with decisions is you're going to hear a decision. You might even note it as a decision. It's really in your best interest to recap that decision during that conversation so that you get an agreement from everybody in attendance that really, did I hear this correctly? We made a decision, yada, yada, yada.
Good point.
Because when you don't do that, they always come back later and go, well, I didn't say that was okay. Or, I didn't agree to that one. Like,
I don't want to belabor the point, but I used to have a template for taking notes in meetings, and most you'll see them if you Google them. You can find a meeting note template, and they're usually tabular and they require you to tab through table cells, and it just slowed me down. So I just moved to a document where all I'm doing is hitting return. I start my bullet list and I tab in or shift tab out, depending on where that bullet point, and it just allows me to get those notes in there. And I'm trying to experiment with collaborative note taking so that the PM is not the only one taking notes.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
We're coming up at 4 p.m. So I think we have time for maybe one more question if anybody has anything. No takers. Would you recommend someone to push forward with the PMP certification if they're an accidental project manager with no certification? Because obviously there's a little bit of difference between real life and PMBOK. So what's your take on that?
So here's what I would do. And Jen, I know, has her opinion on it too. I would make sure that that is within my organization's needs. if the organization wants me to be a certified PMP, then absolutely. If they see that as value and that's how you can advance your career and get more challenges, then awesome. I know I'm being reported, but I don't want PMI to report me or take my certification. I'm not going to say that it's absolutely necessary.
We can cut that part out. We can cut that part out if we cut this last part off, PB.
Right. I look at certifications as another way to put another set of tools in my toolkit. You can be excellent at passing tests and getting tons of certifications and still be a really horrible project manager. I've met these people, I've worked with them before. And even if you ever go to a boot camp for a project management PMP certification, one of the first things they'll tell you is you're going to learn all these things, and then afterwards you're going to go to real life, and you'll probably only use like 1% of what you just learned, right? But that said, like to Ed's point, if it's a thing that the organization is recognizing a need and has a value for, absolutely. I think there's nothing wrong with having that additional set of tools in the toolkit to rely on. And you will find that every now and then, just remembering that, oh yeah, I saw that before, I came across that before. Here's a thing where I can go and say, yeah, let's go ahead and try this out and see if it fixes that issue that we're dealing with here. Because they do have a lot of, experience-based, use case-based scenarios that they can help you say, when you come across this scenario, these are the tools that might help you correct it, or here's the tools to try and get people to make decisions. And there's a lot of information there.
What I will add to that is what the PMP helped me with is really understanding scheduling in terms of the waterfall, predecessors, resourcing, the types of dependencies on task. And I still use that today. If I did not have a class that forced me to study that material, I don't know that I would have mastered it or learned it. So
Donald, I do want
I
to
was
say that.
pleasantly surprised that I learned earned value management in my PMP training and certifications, and actually got to apply it to a federal program that I worked
good for
on.
you.
And the timing was amazing, but I never used it ever since.
Pat, you're gonna have the last word before we sign off.
Sure. So I do want to say that if you want to go for the PMP, they've updated the PMP standards a little bit, so that the latest exam, I took it about 6 months ago. About 60% of the exam was agile. So
Yeah.
just to be
Well, they
aware
just
that
recently acquired another Agile Alliance
Yes.
group too, so
Yeah.
they're
So that's they've definitely tried to move away just from waterfall to include hybrid and all the agile methodologies. Well, not all of them, but there's like 6 or 7 that they'll cover.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And with that, Ed, Jen, we appreciate you. Thank you for doing this presentation. It was great,
my
informative.
pleasure.
Team, thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next month with another session. But thank you so much once again. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Of course. Take care.